Okay, today's lesson is how to choose the right colors on your palette to come up with the suggestion of light that we see on these objects. So what we want to do is stay away from just copying the photograph and looking at areas and deciding what color on my palette best suggests what I'm looking at. And first thing always to consider is the value then and the temperature, but we have to make a color choice, and we want to go over that. And also think through compositionally how we compose this. When I look at this, the water here is kind of the main feature in this image. So a long horizontal would cut off the water. A long horizontal composition here makes the water not as important, and it gets rid of most of it. So I don't want a longer composition. What I want then is maybe a vertical or a square to show more of the importance of the water. And that square, it might be vertical, but definitely square. And you see now the water kind of winds its way back to this area, this probably most sunlit area of the cliffs back in there. So think through composition first. Also the idea that this is the most sunlit part, and the foreground here is just coming out of shadow. So it's slightly in shadow. So I want to reduce the value from about here down and increase the contrast right in here. Also, when I look at this, the grass on top of this cliff here and the hill back in here, that real light grass, way too light. I don't want to make that light. It's just washed out. So think through the composition, the values. The more I can simplify things, the easier it is to come up with colors that I want to use. Looking through some of these others, here's a winter scene. Probably to compose this, I might crop a little bit of the right side because I want to move these cows towards center, not make them dead center, but a little bit towards center, and get rid of some of the tree and stuff on the right that's just too much there and it's not that important. Then value wise, way too dark here, right in here, way too dark. Cows are flat too because they're just one value, so I want to create two values on them. The lighter value is still going to be pretty dark, but I don't want just one value. That flattens it out. And the idea that these darks back in here are going to be getting lighter, or will be lighter compared to the ones in the foreground, but these in the foreground are too dark. So I'll probably lighten up all the darks, this being the lightest dark, then a little darker yet. Darkest would be in the cattle, not over here on the left side. But thinking through color-wise, what colors best represent the trees, the mountains, and I want to use a color on these are cottonwoods, on these trees that suggest the light. Not necessarily a color that best describes the cottonwood, the local color. Always make the light the focal point. So, to me, an orange, and then how do I mute that orange to make it have a more natural color instead of just a bright, intense orange. Same thing here. If these trees are green, they're definitely more blue-green than green. And back in here, they're a bit more blue or blue-violet than blue-green. So there's a lot to think through, but think of colors on the color wheel, the suggestion of light, what color best suggests the light, and focus on the value first. Another one here, on this compositionally, the cliff is my focal point, but it's way over on the left side. Too much going on here on the right side, and also too much sky. The more I can increase the size of the cliff, and I don't want it centered, maybe I'll leave it on the other side of center. I could crop it so it's over the center line. But here the clouds and the mountains in the distance will balance off the bigger shape on the left. And I would probably get rid of the clouds back in here. It follows the edge of the mountain a bit too much and maybe build it up this way. And again, that balances off. I don't want it the same size as the cliff, so I might make it a bit bigger or a lot smaller than the cliffs, trying to create some balance there. And then color-wise, the difference between these two trees, this is definitely more of a green to yellow-green. This is really more of a blue-green, although there's a lot of yellow in it. It's very muted, kind of a really warm bluish green. So I want to think through color-wise the best way to approach that. And again, stay away from the idea of just if I can just mix and mix until I match it, then it's going to work. If I want to create a sunlit blue-green here, I will start with blue or Viridian, add some ochre, maybe a little cad yellow, but then mute it. But the ochre and cad yellow will keep it warm. As long as I don't have too much yellow in there, I don't want to turn it to too much of a yellow green. I want more of a bluish, a really warm bluish green, which, you know, a warm blue-green might be turning into yellow-green soon. But think through what color on the color wheel best comes close to that. Not necessarily can I mix until I match that color, because that's always frustration. Same thing with the cliff. It's more yellow oranges, really light yellow orange, darker yellow orange, maybe some orange to red orange as it comes down. But if I can think more in terms of definite color, then I can either keep it more intense or mute it with a complement. But if I just try and match each different color, it's just not going to work as well. You're going to have a lot of frustration. I'll start in the focal point with those cliffs, and I'll start with the shadow. You know, the shadows are going to have a lot of blue in them no matter what color they are, just because shadows need to be darker and cooler. Blue's my darkest color, so I can get it somewhat more of the right value. It's not real dark. That's about the right value, and it's the right temperature. But it does, you know, the shadow does have the local color in it, so I'm going to add some red orange, not yellow orange. Yellow orange is in the sunlight, more yellow because of the strong sunlight. So in the shadow, it's going to be orange, but it's going to be more of a reddish orange. So I'll get some blue with a little bit of red orange in it. Now, I might keep it a little bit stronger blue, but some red orange. Then I can come back and add a little bit more red orange directly to the shadow. I can do more mixing right on the canvas, adding more yellow orange or more red orange to the shadow. Or I can mix it all on the palette. It gets more muted on the palette, stays a little stronger if I put the blue violet down first and then mix the red orange and scrub it in there. And right now this is a little thicker than the light because I need this to sink into this. I got some of the light color down there, which I will thicken up the light so it's a lot thicker than the shadow later. But this has to go on top of the light. Now if there was more shadow, there were big shadows in here, a big pattern, I would put those in first and then put the light around it. But the shadows are small and I don't want to paint around them. So I'm going to put them on top. We'll be painting around them some when I add more color to the light areas. I want to simplify all this stuff. There's a bunch of little cliffs there that I think are way too picky. So I'm going to keep it simple. Same thing with the background back in here. I might lighten this a little bit and just add more blue. Gray it with a touch of orange. Shadows get bluer as they recede, so these will be a little bluer. And I'm going to simplify them a lot more. So there's my shadows. And again, it isn't a finished product for the shadows yet either. I just want to get basic shapes in there. Basic dark and light. I got the darks down here and darks here and darks in the cliffs. Now I'm going to get a little bit of color change because I want some variation in that lighter value up there. I'm not talking about the color change to the orange down here and then red orange down there. I'm talking within the top layer of this kind of a real light yellow orange. I'm going to add a little bit of alizarin crimson, or I could add the cad red deep. But all that gives me is a little subtle color change. And I'm not going to worry about the shadows too much, like this one that's pretty small. I should put the light on there first. The big one I can paint around. And I want to vary the shape quite a bit. I want to make sure I get the shape I want, the edge on the top part here. And I'm kind of overlapping the sky a bit more. And that yellow orange, real light, really makes it look sunlit. I mean, it's really strong. So that allows me to come in with some cooler colors and knock it down a bit, but it's still going to be really sunlit, just not overly so. I don't want it looking like straight from the tube. Get a little violet in with the yellow orange here. And again, if I cover up some of that shadow, I can put the shadow back on top later. Then I've got my yellow orange here. I'm going to add more orange just on the edge, because now it's going to move from a yellow orange to orange. I'm going to add a little bit of alizarin to that too. It's going to cool it slightly, but it's still going to be very, very warm. Add more red. Looking for more of an orange that's the right value compared to the lighter value. And that's about the value of what I blocked in the painting with. Now if I get some white and ultramarine and get it a little darker than the sky on top, I can create a little more contrast. And I can cut into this cliff and shape it up a bit more. I'm using the same brush, but I cleaned it off. Now with a clean brush, I can lose some of the edges. Probably get a little darker down here. It's a little closer than up there. So this is white and alizarin. Add a little bit of orange to it. Now with a bluish green, and I'll mix it right here within all these oranges, because that's where it has to kind of relate value-wise. I'm going to use blue with a little bit of ochre. And the dark trees look real dark in the photograph, but I don't want to get them too dark. And I want to keep them a little bluer green and mass them together. Not a lot of little shapes. And a bit more yellow to make it slightly greener. Trying to keep from getting all the same size shrubbery on the cliff. Have a few separate ones, but not very many. It's better to group them together a bit more. Now I need to darken up these a little bit because they're too light. They're too much the same value as these and too much the same value as that. So I'm going to get the blue and yellow and mix it just on the edge of this violet. It'll pick up a little bit of the violet. So that's going to give me more contrast. It means I have to darken the shadows. So I'm going to ignore the shadows and just paint right over them. So this is my light, which is pretty dark compared to the other lights. This is the darkest light in the painting. So fairly thick paint, so it stands out more as an upright plane. Load it up again. So you're always adjusting values, or at least I am. Now there might be some lighter lights in here, but this is my overall light that I think works compared to the overall light of the bushes and the overall light of the flat plane and then the mountain as well. So now blue and a little bit of ochre and orange. And let's get some shadow in here. And just looking for a pattern that might show more of the shape of the trees more, and I'm painting into pretty thick light paint, so I'm having to load up the brush each time. This tree that's I'm going to have bigger and kind of stand out from the other trees. A bit more yellow in there and orange. It's not a big color change. I want it to be kind of subtle and emphasize more blue green over here. Maybe some Viridian and Cad Yellow in here to make that stand out a bit more. So a little bit of color change. I'm going from a darker, kind of a green. It's not really blue-green or yellow-green, but darker, more blue. And here, a little bit white, it slightly turns to a yellow-green. The more I can get some dark accents in there, the more it gives it a stronger sense of light. Now I'll come back into this gray or blue-green. And let's get a little stronger Viridian. I want a little more blue-green to stand out, but I can add anything to it that's going to knock it down. The orange, red-orange, a little bit of violet, anything would knock it down. I want to pull it out just a bit more than that, so not quite that gray. So a few areas of stronger green. And I'll add some violet to that green for the shrubbery, and violet will gray it. And I'll add some of that in there. So I want kind of a variety of muted and stronger color. Again, even cerulean hue here is going to be, in this case, a cooler green. So I could even use that. And let's get a pretty strong violet now. I won't add any of the other greens to it, but I want it the right value. There's a lot of bare branches in here, and a clean violet will look like the sunlit kind of branches, so I'll scatter that around. Not rendering branches at all, just suggesting them as strokes of violet. Some color variation and some value change to suggest more detail in here. There's a lot of clutter in this shrubbery, and I'm trying to simplify it. This is a bit more muted. I don't want it drawing attention away from the mountains, so keeping it pretty muted, and I'm going to come back with brush strokes to kind of knock that down. A little bit of a path going back there. You got to be careful with path being everywhere in every painting, but it does pull the eye back. In the photograph, it's just too straight across with this shrubbery. Trying to break up the shapes here. So I'll drag some shrubbery around in here. So the edge is a bit more broken up. And don't deviate from the simplicity of what you see, like the oranges, yellow oranges, green, blue-green, yellow-green. Because you can always gray it or make it brighter, but it's that simplicity of your thinking when you're mixing color that really helps.